Good. So, dear colleagues, thank you so much for coming here. Those who are in person and those who are online. We know there's quite many colleagues also registered to participate online, so both of them are very welcome to this meeting. It is really a very important meeting for us because this kind of the international guidance on how to achieve SDGs and how to localize SDGs, really important. I think it's very timely because we at UNECE and our partner at UN Habitat, we're receiving lots of requests, a lot of questions. What the VLR is about, how to localize. If I do VLR, where I'm submitting it? This is one of the questions we're receiving now, for instance. And, you know, there is still quite a gap. There is actually no responses to all these questions. Also, what concerns the governance, the data. So there's lots of kind of white spots. So this event really, well, not quite to initiate the discussion, to continue this discussion. I would say that it really will try to go in depth of this discussion, and also we are especially looking forward to hear from our colleagues at the national level and at the local level, at the city level. And I think both of them are very, very important. Also, the views of our partners is very important. This event on localizing SDGs is co-organized by UNECE and UN Habitat. However, we are very happy to see also participation of other organizations like OECD, our academic partners, both University of Geneva, University of Harvard, and also ESCAP. I'm very glad Kurt from our sister regional commission also is here, so that promises us a very fruitful discussion. So just a little bit to say what are the plans with voluntary local reviews at the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. Again, to remind you that we at UNECE actually, our main function is that we are secretariat to Intergovernmental Committee on Urban Development, Housing and Management, which means that we are supporting the work on achieving SDGs of 56 member states, national governments, which are basically senior government officials at the national level. And today we see the Forum of Mayors taking place, which basically proves that the national governments expressed their interest, because the forum didn't happen itself. It was decision of our member states to organize the forum, in fact, as a part of a session, intergovernmental session of our Committee on Urban Development, Housing and Management, because this is really recognition that implementation, achieving SDGs, localization of SDGs, is really taking at the very local level. What I would like to express also that these 2 years we lived in the situation of the COVID-19 pandemic. We worked a lot with all of you to overcome its economic, social, negative consequences, the ones for vulnerable groups, the homeless, those living in formal settlements, families, and we see that voluntary local reviews is really a very important tool of reaching SDGs, achieving SDGs, and also overcoming negative consequences of the pandemic, but also helping to mitigate and adapt to the climate change challenges, as well as to achieve SDGs. So I think this really helps us to integrate, to kind of put together, develop one methodology for achieving SDGs. Localization of SDGs is very important because we know that actually most of the implementation is taking place at the local level, and we know that at least since 2008, especially with the housing crisis at that point, we observed the process of localization, of decentralization of many functions in many countries. So there is really a lot of weight on the local government shoulders. Also, we saw this was happening during the pandemic. We at UNECE are receiving quite many requests as the national governments, as the local governments to assist or to help to facilitate exchange of experiences in developing voluntary local review, and we do so in many countries and many cities. We developed together with our partner regional guidelines on voluntary local review, which were endorsed by the committee session last year. We understand they're not perfect, and they now they are open to be redeveloped. And for us, this event is very important. We would like to hear from you about what you see if we speak about any international standards, international guidelines, what they should contain, what they should not contain. But what is important for us is that, first of all, they make reference to existing documents, to all UN documents. And in fact, the regional guidelines, they do have references to what other regional commissions developed, UN Habitat developed, OECD developed. But it's not an easy process, right? Because if we speak about the data, and this will be one of our panels, each of us are using actually very different systems of standards and indicators. So in addition to the topic of how we organize development of the VLRs, the question is what data we collect, what indicators we use, how do we implement, how we finance implementation of the recommendations. So I think today will be a very, very rich discussion. We're very much looking forward for this discussion. Also to mention that we at UNECE, understanding the complexity of the process, developed an online training module on VLRs, which is kind of a very open one, together with University of Geneva and Harvard. And many thanks to all colleagues who contributed to this, because it's really a real multi-agency work, and we really see that also academia would like to use that training module. So I hope also we can develop that one as well. So I guess there are lots of questions. It's a very exciting discussion. We really hope that we have many follow-up meetings. And with this, it is my great pleasure to give floor to Shipra at UN Habitat, also to welcome this meeting on UN Habitat side.
Thanks very much. It's great to see a full house. It's really fantastic. And a full house in person, not a full house on Zoom, which is very different. So thank you, Gulnara, and thank you, UNECE, for making this possible. Really, we are very grateful. And I'm frankly, I think after having attended this forum in person, I don't know how I will go back to online meetings ever again. So it's really a pleasure, not least because of the richness of contributions that we've already heard from mayors, the voices we've heard from the ground, the peer learning that is going on, the exchange between mayors, but also city officials, national governments, international organizations, research organizations. It's really a fantastic space. At UN Habitat, I lead the Urban Practices branch, which is the sort of normative nerve center of the agency, but also I also lead the work on local governance and SDG localization. So this is a really important moment for us to share with you, but also start a process of reflection and engagement, particularly for this region. I think one reality that we are facing, and we're seeing this over several years, particularly now, I think literally in the context of the day, is that the multilateral system is being weakened. It is being weakened, and it is not fit for purpose in so many ways. There are actors that it doesn't engage. There are actors that have emerged as powerful players on the front lines, which do not have a voice in the multilateral system. And there are many voices that have been calling for a renewed multilateralism, particularly from the bottom up, saying, where are the voices from the trenches? And the UN, I think, and the Secretary General in particular, has heeded these calls, has embraced these calls, and the report that we had, Our Common Agenda, which was launched by the SG, really talks about the future of multilateralism with cities, local authorities, and processes such as VLRs at the center of this renewed, inclusive multilateralism. This is very important as a starting point for this conversation because, as Gulnara said, a lot of people say, yes, we'll do VLRs, but where do they fit within the larger multilateral context? What is the role of cities in this larger multilateral context? And I think we need to understand that this is a moment in time where there is an opportunity to engage local actors and to advance local agendas and local voices in the multilateral system. Because of course, the centrality of local action has never been as prominent or as important or as visible as it is today. Whether we look at the pandemic, local governments being at the front lines of containment, of response, of recovery, of engagement, of protecting their citizens, but also rebuilding their economies. I think that's very, very clear that without local action, we would neither overcome the health impacts of the pandemic nor the socioeconomic impacts of the pandemic. Then, when you look at the climate crisis, which is the second, the all-pervasive, actually, the pandemic will pass, but the climate crisis will not pass so easily. But when you look at the climate crisis, the fact that all the carbon-intensive sectors, buildings, transport, waste, cities are in cities, and cities are responsible for a very large proportion, 75%, of greenhouse gas emissions. At the same time, cities are also highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. So with this duality, the centrality of cities and the centrality of local action is absolutely fundamental. And finally, as we are seeing now today in the past 4 or 5 weeks, with the entire conflict in Ukraine, the role of cities and local democracy in both cities as an arena for conflict, but also the role of cities and local democracy and mayors, again, as central to peace building and reconstruction and recovery. So whatever we're talking about in the international context, whether it is development, whether it is peace, whether it is climate, the road to achieving these goals passes through cities and through local governments. And that is why, the movement towards VLRs, where cities and their communities and their populations embrace the global agendas, advance the global agendas, own the global agendas, is very important. And the VLRs emerged not because of a writ or a resolution in the General Assembly. They emerged as an innovation by cities, of cities. They emerged because cities wanted a voice, and they wanted to be able to demonstrate that they're buying into the global agendas. This is how it started just a few years ago, and the traction is that from 1 VLR or 2 or 3 from a New York and 3 towns in Japan and a Helsinki, we now have 150 odd VLRs that have been published or are in various stages of being produced. In Europe alone, I think we're talking about 40 odd VLRs that have been published, and OECD is doing a lot of work also with the indicators space and supporting local governments as is UNECE. So I think this is at least in my work with local governments over 25 years, I have not seen a movement that has grown so quickly and so universally that it's not just Europe, it's Africa, it's Asia, it's Latin America, it's SIDS, it's everybody who feels that, okay, the SDGs are the pathway, the SDGs are the framework, the SDGs are the common compass. And how do we show our commitment, and how do we engage with the SDGs and make them our compass at the local levels? I think that's where the VLRs have become very important. clearly at the community level, at the local level, and a lot of questions that come to us are also about, are the VLRs an add-on to my normal planning processes, and are they going to be more of a burden? But a lot of the experience shows that they have become central. I mean, Madrid is here and many others who have made it central. Localization is central to your plans, which we look forward to hearing more about today. And the impact of VLRs is also being felt at the national level. It's not just local. The fact that more and more voluntary local reviews are receiving a mention in voluntary national reviews, the fact that it is opening up the discussion on multi-level governance when the discussion on decentralization was not going very far with national governments. I think the VLRs offer us the opportunity of opening up that conversation again. Because at some point we had come to a standstill on the discussion on devolution and decentralization. So I think the multi-level governance conversation. And at the international level, of course, whether it's the high-level political forum or here at the Forum of Mayors or at the World Urban Forum, the VLR movement is amplifying the voices of cities and local governments in a big way. We're very happy to be friends and allies and partners in crime with UNECE in this process. I think there's a lot for us to do together to add value, to deliver support to cities, to develop new normative guidance, to constantly improve and tweak our normative guidance, our work on indicators, to constantly engage and say what works, what doesn't work. Because, all the cities that we speak to have a different experience. And to synthesize that whole body of experience and to say, this is the guidance, is very hard. There is no one guidance. And I think we would make a mistake if we were to try and straitjacket the VLRs into one guidance, one box, not only across regions, but even within a region. So we're very mindful of that. The experience, the data availability, the stakeholder engagement, the governance systems, the institutional capacity, the resources of every city are different. Many cities find common ground if they're, like intermediary cities across Asia and Latin America, we find common ground. Perhaps more than cities in Asia, which are metropolises, and cities in Asia, which are secondary or tertiary cities. So I think we need to look at that common ground. We have a new project coming up on VLRs in Eastern Europe and Central Asia with UNECE. It's absolutely fundamental that we use the lessons from this room and from similar conversations to actually launch a program that is relevant and responsive and purposeful. However, let me conclude by saying that this is only the start of the conversation. Let me flag two key upcoming places where we will continue the conversation. The first is the World Urban Forum in Katowice in Poland at the end of June. It's the first time that it is in this region. So we really hope to see a very rich representation from this region with the support of UNECE at the World Urban Forum in Katowice, where we take this conversation forward, where SDG localization and VLRs will have a privileged space. And then straight after that, the High-Level Political Forum, where since last year we have created this space called VLR VSR Days, Voluntary Local Reviews and Voluntary Subnational Reviews, because the High-Level Political Forum is fundamentally a member state arena. It is not a local government arena. And these 3 days back to back with the HLPF allow us to bring many more local voices into the headquarters, so to speak. So with those, thank you very much. We walk with you and try and achieve the goals of localization together in this region and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shipra. I think that was a really very good stress on the fact of the multiplicity of the experiences, and we should not try to straitjacket this process, but really do everything to help the achieving SDGs at all different levels. So with big thanks, and now I would like to invite Alexander Hirtazi, Director of Global Environmental Policy Program at University of Geneva, to moderate the session number 1. And this is about the experience of cities in developing the voluntary local reviews. So, Alexander.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Gulnara and Shipra, to bring academia in. I'm very delighted with my colleague Matteo Tarantina, who will be speaking in the second panel, but also obviously moderating this session with my colleague from Harvard sitting here, Spiro Polalis. It is very important to mention that within my panel, where we have more than cities, we also have central government, so that the multi-level governance that you mentioned is obviously going to be discussed. Very delighted to have 4 very prominent people with the very rich experiences through their organizations that could feed or thinking about how to improve VLRs and how to move ahead, taking stock also of the complexity that we are facing. We will start with Joel Algren, who's the Program Director of Sustainable Cities, think tank Global Challenge from Sweden. His presentation will take stock of some of the bottlenecks, challenges, but also opportunities of working across the cities that the program has selected. Will be followed by Ms. Krista Campus's presentation on who's head the European Union and International Cooperation Executive and Director of European Green Capital in Tallinn, Estonia. Krista's, your presentation will take again stock of a pilot network that you have built up through Tallinn. We then moved to the city of Madrid with Santiago. Santiago, thanks for being here. Mr. Martinez will, as a counselor for international relations, City of Madrid, will explain to us how some of the indicators, that the work that you're doing on indicators, can be used for by other to build up this community of practice, and also the question of engagement, obviously, of different stakeholders. And finally, with Mr. Xavier Dargaud, Deputy Director for External Action of Local Governments at the Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs from France, how, from the central government point of view or position, we can help cities to build up this, again, community of practice. Thank you all, and the floor is yours, Joel, to share your insights with us.
Thank you so very much, Alexander and Gulnara and Shipra, for these excellent introductory points. I hope that you can hear me. I am very sorry that I couldn't join you in person in Geneva, but I hope that it will work. My name is Joel Ahlgren, and I'm the program director at the Swedish-based think tank Global Utmaning, and we have a long-standing history of working together with UNECE and UN Habitat in promoting the local implementation of the SDGs. And now we are focusing on the voluntary local review process as a catalyst for sustainable development. And today I will share some very preliminary and brief results from a mapping and survey that we are conducting in the Baltic Sea region and Eastern Partnership countries on experiences and expectations on the VLR process among local stakeholders, cities and municipalities. I hope that you can perhaps change the slide, or if am I to do that? Oh, good, thank you. So as Gulnara said, we all know that there is a great interest about the VLRs, but also a lot of questions. A lot of questions from municipalities that are interested in pursuing this process as a means to advance their work on the local implementation. And we wanted to investigate, how do we go from guidelines to action? What kind of support do municipalities and cities need when they will pursue the work of the voluntary local review? And especially focusing on the region that we are familiar with, that is the Baltic Sea region and the Eastern Partnership. We have therefore conducted a number of interviews and mappings with, for example, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Ukraine, to learn about what challenges do they experience when pursuing, both conducting VLRs, but also pursuing the interest in conducting a VLR, but also what opportunities have the VLR process provided them with in order to inform what we hope to develop as a capacity building program for peer-to-peer exchanges on the topic. So I will share with you today a very brief overview of challenges and opportunities and some ideas for ways forward. And I will elaborate more on them in the discussion, and these will also be presented in a report later this spring that we will be happy to share both with the UN Habitat and UNECE and all members of today's session. So if we move to the next slide, I will highlight, and this will echo what's already been highlighted by Chitra and Gulnara about these broad topics of challenges that are seen when talking about municipalities in this region working with SDGs on the local level. And I will say something brief about them. So, firstly, there is a challenge concerning the language. And the language, both when it comes to the language of the SDGs being very global, now we need to translate into the local context. But furthermore, the VLR has to be more user-friendly. I know that UNECE have developed these guidelines and these methods, so have many other UN agencies and the EU and other stakeholders. But we need to think about the simplification to make it very applicable to a civil servant, perhaps only having a few hours per week to dive into these topics and these processes. We need to translate our sort of global language into the local context. For example, avoid acronyms, very simple things. Also, the topic of indicators that's already been highlighted many times and will be discussed in greater detail today. But we need indicators at the local level to track progress over time. And one thing that has been brought to our attention in our work is that indicators can also be political. The political leadership in municipalities and cities can choose which indicators to use when conducting a VLR, but then they tend to choose the ones that will showcase their success. We need indicators also to showcase challenges and obstacles at the local level. What's already been said, making global goals relevant to the local context, the need for translation. Another topic that is already brought to attention and was mentioned about national and local responsibility. On the one hand, the VLR has proven very successful in empowering cities to take responsibility for education. We know that the local level is crucial in doing this. At the other hand, many are asking for national guidelines, support and mandates to support and conduct VLRs. But it is a voluntary process by and for cities. So a question that arises is how much requirements and pressure can the national level put on the local level when it comes to conducting VLRs? Many have also noted that guidelines tend to focus on what to do, not how to do it. But there are also some opportunities, and I will go through this quite quickly. But the VLRs, being a recognized process, having this UN umbrella surrounding it, it creates opportunities for cooperation. And it also means to communicate progress and challenges with citizens at the local level. And compared to processes, it creates a measure progress over I know my time is running short, but a few other things that we have noted in our in our mapping so far, you need to go forward. Let's see if we can change the slide possible. As I said, there is a need for collaboration between cities and regions. There is a need for better political and financial support to make the VLRs a recurring process to track progress and challenges over time. One thing that also been brought forward already is that there is a lack of a framework for how existing VLRs are shared and reviewed by regional and global peers, similarly to the high-level political forum, but for the VLRs. What happens to them when they are submitted, or where do we submit them? Similarly, the linkages between VNRs and VLRs. Some countries have done so very good, others, this linkages is completely lacking, and the shared vocabulary. And finally, if we take our last slide, just to sort of note how we will work with this going forward. This mapping will, as I said, be presented as a report here in May, and that will inform a leadership program or sustainability lab in this region, where we hope that cities and municipalities can work together to support each other in this important work. We believe actually that there is this need for practical peer-to-peer changes that is the key going forward. So with that, I will look forward to the future discussions where we can dive deeper into these topics. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joel. And this is a very insightful input that you're having here for the discussion. Taking stock of some of the elements that you mentioned, I really want to emphasize on the importance of the language used, as well as the collaboration between different levels of governance, cities and regions, and also the question of financing that is comes back again and again in the discussions, as well as the shared vocabulary. Thank you very much. We will have an opportunity to come back on that. The floor is yours, Krista. Please share with us your insights from Tallinn.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me, for having me. I think it is extremely important place to discuss about the role of the cities, about the localizing the SDGs, and also the role of the VLRs. I would like actually to introduce how City of Tallinn, together with the other European cities, is working on the SDGs, and also what are the, let's say, the findings and maybe some insights when it comes to the role of the voluntary local reviews, but also where we are when it comes to localizing SDGs. At first, I would like to say that, as you see, we have 19 cities from 19 European countries who are participating from south to north in this network, and it is considered as the pilot network because it is the first and only cross-European network working with local implementation of the SDGs. Tallinn is the lead partner. We are financed by the URBAC program, and we are collaborating with Council of European Municipalities and regions as well. And the aim is really to support the EU cities, and not only the capitals, but also small and medium-sized cities, to build capacities and develop tools to localize the SDGs. Next slide, please. And I'm sorry, apologize if I have to skip some of my slides because time is extremely limited. So basically, this network, we started a year ago, from February last year. And we are focusing on three main, let's say, areas of localization. The first, governance models and mechanisms for the SDGs in cities. The second, elaborating, let's say, local indicators and also monitoring a system for assessing and evaluating the progress when it comes to implementation SDGs. And also the third one is stakeholder and citizen engagement and participation. And here actually we are also collaborating with many different organizations like UN Habitats, UCLG, Learning, and OECD as well. So because for us, this network is not kind of closed club, but we really would like to outreach and engage also other cities across the globe in this work. Next slide. I think what is very unique element, because there were questions at the beginning of the seminar, that what is the role of the VLRs and how cities have to work with SDGs and what is the common language we have to use. So we took, like all 19 cities, we took a very systemic approach when it comes to localization. All 19 cities are actually using exactly the same approach and the same methodology for SDGs localization. based on URBAC, the integrated action planning method. And I think that is what makes that network also quite unique, and why it makes this network also as a pilot for the European Union. When it comes to integrated action planning, then actually all 19 cities should, by the end of this, let's say, collaboration, they should have local plan on how they are work with SDGs and how they are localize it. And integrated means that it should be done in collaboration and, let's say, co-creation with different stakeholders in the specific cities. We have 5 key phases in this process. At first, we need to assess and diagnose where we are as the city when it comes to localization process. The second is we have to set the vision, but also we have to plan the actions, but we also have to identify the indicators and targets that are relevant for the local context for the specific cities. And finally, we also have to create a narrative and we have to tell the SDG story of our cities. By the way, you all are very, very welcomed to conference on sustainable cities in Tallinn that will take place January next year as part of the European Green Capital opening event in Tallinn. Actually, we also will participate in World Urban Forum in Katowice, and we are going to organize there a roundtable that will actually focus on local national dialogue and SDGs governance. The second slide. Starting point, and I think it is very important, before we are discussing about the VLRs, we really have to recognize that despite that we have several and increasing numbers, a number of front-running cities when it comes to elaboration and submission of the VLRs, the majority of the cities are still in the very, very beginning of the journey. And I think it is something we really should not forget. But I also think that this is definitely and very directly related to the fact that there is a lot of cities who need the competence building and knowledge when it comes to working with SDGs. The next slide, please. And also from our network, there is only one city who is now planning to submit the VLR and elaborate the VLR. All others are not there yet. Also, when it comes to the city of Tallinn, where I am working, we have decided that we are not starting with the VLR, but VLR should be the end outcome of our internal work. And I will, let's say, introduce that a little bit later as well. But when as we started with let's say, diagnosis that where those 19 cities are when it comes to localization, then you can see that there are two biggest challenges. The first is citizens' engagement in concrete actions and knowledge about SDGs. But the second set of the challenges is related to integrating SDGs into existing strategies and plans, and also convincing politicians about adopting the SDGs. And I think this is also related to the first or the previous slide, which showed that the majority of the cities are just in the beginning of the localization of SDGs. But the same actually two, let's say, aspects that where challenges are also considered as an opportunities. Next slide, please. I think when it comes to elaborating the VLR, then it is extremely important, and the most important thing is that you really have to assess as the city, as the region, where you are. Our network is using CMR framework, which is reference framework for sustainable cities. And as I said, that we all are using exactly the same methods and methodology. And I think it is very good because it provides opportunity to compare where the cities are, but it also provides the common platform for peer learning and for exchanging best practices and examples. And why we decided to choose this tool, it is because that it actually provides an opportunity at first to assess what are the priority SDGs for each of the city. But the second one, it also actually helps to identify whether there are gaps between the prioritized SDG and the planned actions and measures. And next slide, please. Yeah, this is example from Tallinn. I should be probably, I don't know, shamed, but I'm not, because as I said, we also started and we want to do it right. So, and for us, that using that tool actually provided extremely good overview where we are, and especially when it comes to identifying gaps between prioritized SDGs and the projects, actions, activities we are using at the moment in order to achieve the objectives of those goals. And as you can see that there are quite big gaps, but it helps us maybe to kind of to let's say rethink, you know, and revise our current projects and measures and activities. Definitely, you know, that was done before the war in Ukraine. And I think today that goal 17, definitely for the city of Tallinn as well, if we would do it again now, goal 17 would be extremely high priority for us. There
Krista,
are yes.
Krista, you have 1 more minute.
Okay, so let's skip the slides, couple of slides. Let's skip that one as well. and the next one. And the next one, and the next one, and this is my last slide. So my main point is that I think it is extremely important. Gulnara, you asked that there are, you know, like many cities or municipalities are asking that to where we have to submit the VLR. My response is that you have to submit it to your council at first. So I think that it is very important that VLR is not elaborated for just submission for the high-level policy forum, but the VLR is having, you know, integral role and part when it comes to strategic planning process of the city or municipalities. And the second is that we have to start from integrating fully the SDGs indicators and targets in the city monitoring system. And as I showed, the self-assessment should be and can be as a starting point. So VLR should have meaning also internal in the city. And I think that if we are able to incorporate in the general, let's say, strategic planning system and hierarchy of the city, then by the end of the day, we will get meaningful VLR, which also has added value for submission to high-level policy forum. And definitely, like big bottlenecks, we have discovered these definitely SDGs knowledge and mindset, also internal in the city. But I think that the self-assessment and identification of the indicators and targets internally in the city, while really like involving all different departments in this work, as we have done in the city of Tallinn, definitely helps to increase the knowledge and understanding what SDGs are, and also showing that SDGs are not something in addition or additional, but they are actually what we are doing and we're supposed to do in our everyday strategic work in the city. And definitely it is very important to make SDGs as a part of your story of your city. You have to tell your city, and you really have to create very good narrative that people are interested to join with and contribute to. So this is my last slide, and I thank you very much for your patience. And I'm sorry that I had to be pass my slide very fast. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Krista. This is obviously a very good occasion for us also to understand some of how these pilot networks can help cities to move ahead with the fundamental element that you mentioned in terms of diagnostic and assessment. That helps some of these SDGs to be, I mean, dealing with SDGs in a very dynamic way while fixing indicators. I'm sure we'll have the occasion of coming back on that. I just want to give the floor to you, Santiago. Mr. Sora Martinez is from Consular of International Relations, representing City of Madrid. We are listening to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alexander. I would like to thank UNECE for organizing this forum of mayors and also UN Habitat, University of Geneva, and other partners co-organizing this side event, for inviting us to participate in it today. Several issues have been raised on critical issues on how to develop SDG localization and voluntary local reviews. Here in my talk today, I would like to stress two critical factors for successful design, but also implementation of the SDGs and voluntary local reviews, which are first, the engagement of all actors and all citizens in the strategy and in their implementation. And second, the need to have quantitative, transparent and consistent reporting related to the SDGs and the VLRs. Along these lines, in Madrid, we have approved, like 1 year ago, right after the strongest peak of the pandemic, an updated localization strategy of the SDGs in our city, in which we put to work all the city departments of the Madrid City Council, but also we got feedback and contributions from the third sector, from the private sector, from trade unions, etc., so that we produce a strategy with 104 local targets and 160 indicators. In fact, there were more than we were planning to have at the beginning, but this is because we got a rich set of contributions and we added more and more indicators and targets to this strategy. After approving this strategy, what we are doing is, in one hand, working on the dissemination of it, because we are spending like about €1 million per year on projects for what we call education on sustainable development and global citizenship, where we go to public schools, to universities, and also to other, let's say, more open spaces for the rest of the citizens, and we explain both the SDGs in general and the local targets and the local strategy in Madrid in particular. Another line we are working in the strategy and now after is that the strategy is not just words. It is a strategy which has a quantitative basis, which is measurable, and that gives credibility, and that gives an essential component of the strategy, that we can measure where we are, how we are evolving every year, and how we are advancing, or in some cases having barriers that we also need to identify and track. This is also important to not just to report, but also to engage citizens. And in this line of engagement, we are working now on disaggregating the indicators at a finer spatial scale, downscaling the indicators so that we don't have just the information at the city level, but for those indicators where this is possible, we provide the status and the trends for the district level in each of the 21 districts of the city of Madrid. These, among other things, allow us to show up the spatial distribution of inequalities, for instance, how to work on territorial balance, and how to act on these spatial inequalities that we also need to tackle in the implementation of the strategy. And also we are working in designing a web-based system which is fully interactive. It's not just like the typical PDF report where you describe the trends, but we want the citizens to navigate, to explore, and to go to those indicators, to those targets, and to those areas of the city where they live or where they are most interested in. So this is like an exercise of transparency, but also an exercise of commitment and implication of the citizens while doing so. Another important concern for Madrid, but broadly on indicators, is the harmonization across cities. We know that many cities, we do have indicators, strategies, but then when we come to put together our different efforts or to aggregate them at the national level, this is an issue. And we are, from Madrid, contributing to the international efforts on developing common, harmonized indicators that are globally accepted. And in fact, we have been supporting the Global Urban Monitoring Framework that is led by UN Habitat to monitor the new urban agenda and also the urban dimension of the SDGs, a monitoring framework that has been recently endorsed by the UN Statistical Commission. We are very happy to be at that point. Now, at the moment, in Madrid, we are working in developing our voluntary local review, but we want to put a specific focus on several angles on the voluntary local review. First, we want to be like a pilot of this global urban monitoring framework, how the common globally accepted indicators can be used for in our city to make this voluntary local review. Also, we have a territorial focus. Of course, we have broad indicators from the entire city, but we want to focus in particular in Madrid New North, which is one of the largest urban regeneration projects in Europe, probably. And we want to put a special focus on climate neutrality from the design and beginning of this new urban development, new urban regeneration project. And then finally, this climate neutrality is not just an SDG alone, but is an umbrella for many city transformations that are happening and will need to happen. And we will put this climate neutrality SDG as probably one of the main ones that will also cover and include many items from other local targets and SDGs in this voluntary local review. So this is a bit of the work that we have been doing, the point where we are now, and I hope that our experience and the share with others, all the points that colleagues have raised, may contribute, of course, to this shared target of moving forward the SDGs locally in this case.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Santiago. This is, once again, a very insightful input from the City of Madrid and how true harmonization that comes back again in our discussion, common language, and also transparency and accountability. We can also bring in as much as possible the stakeholders, and including obviously citizens. The final element that you mentioned is the big umbrella that is pretty much what we discussed yesterday within the UN Habitat other session on system approach to indicators. Thank you very much. We will come back on that in the conclusions, I'm sure. I want to give the floor to you, Mr. Xavier Dagov, Deputy Delegate for External Action of Local Governments from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and European and Foreign Affairs from France.
Yeah, thank you, Alexander. Thank you to all UN programs and UN agencies for inviting me, representative of the central government, as you say, to elaborate a bit on what we do to help local authorities to localize and develop the SDGs, not only in France, but also overseas and in developing countries. And I think France is quite specific in that action. I mean, in the sense that we have a delegate, which I co-head with my boss, and we have about a team of 10 people, and so we're part of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, so it's we're all diplomats. And I think France is quite unique in having this unit, and because we have means and we've got financial means to help this, and I will explain a bit further what means we have. But really the idea is to, as we see like diplomacy, you've got the state diplomacy, the parliamentary diplomacy, and we've got the local authorities diplomacy. And to us, for France, it's very much, it's very important to help French local authorities to extend and have links with other local authorities in the world. And so the unit I'm co-heading is really instrumental in this. And of course, the general framework of what we do is to promote the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs. And this is part of the new law on solidarity development and fight against global inequalities, which, by the way, sets an obligation for French local authorities over 50,000 citizens to have a report to Parliament on how they implement SDGs. So this is not only voluntary, but compulsory. I'm not sure, I mean, the law is not as detailed as what we've seen from the previous speaker. It's just very detailed. It's just a general obligation for big cities over 50,000 to report on the SDGs, how they're implemented in France. And also the law, I mean, expand on the means that we have the RCT to help French local authorities to develop their external action. So we do this at the RCT for small projects, but we are complemented and supplemented rather by AFD, the French Development Agency, that goes for capital investment and infrastructure investment, just as GTZ or GIZ. So we work together, and so our budget has doubled over the last 5 years. Now, the different means that we have really is that first, in France, we like a commission. So we've got the National Commission for External Action of Local Authorities, which is chaired by the Prime Minister, and in fact, it's chaired by the Minister, the Foreign Minister, and we convene twice a year. And it's on part of you've got representative of local authorities and the central government, and we discuss on issues and how to implement the Agenda 2030 and the general goals. So we work hand in hand, really. So that's just one avenue of cooperation. The other avenue is that we finance Association of Local Authorities in France. So you've got the Mayors Association, Association des Maires de France, France Urbaine for big metropolis. We have Département de France, and we basically finance about 12 of them. So in their external action, so they would, implement, the SDGs overseas, and also we finance them to attend different forums like the World Urban Forum in Katowice or the high-level political forum. So we really want them to be part of all the development agenda. And really, our main tool really is we finance call for proposals. So we've got different call for proposal. We've got a general one. We've got thematic ones on environment, on gender equality, on sports, on education, and of course, one of the criteria for selection is to achieve the SDGs. So the more SDGs a proposal would refer to, the better the mark would be, and probably the more finance they would get. But so our general budget is about over 10 million euros. Plus you add the budget of AFD, so the development agency, and you've got a package of over 20 million really to help local authorities to implement SDGs. SDGs are not only in developing countries, but as well in Europe, probably not EU, but outside EU, European countries. And lastly, what we do as well is when we organize seminars, we do some advocacy work and all this. And lately we have renewed a partnership with UNDP. And if I may, I would give the floor to Alex Elephant, will explain a bit further what we are trying to achieve. But really the idea for us is not only to work, from French cities to foreign cities, but as well to go through the UNDP with its power and its capacity to implement projects, and to really tap on its expertise. So we basically try to probably set a call for proposal with the UNDP to expand further a bit what we do. But so really, what the DACT does is, help French cities and departments, so county level and regional level, to implement, SDGs throughout projects. This is our main, and I think it's quite unique to have this at national level. Mm-hmm. I know in Spain it's very much at provincial level, probably in Germany as well. But here it's, this is France, so it has to be centralized and decentralized.
In order to be decentralized.
It has to be. So we're trying to, refine it. So really the initiative comes from local authorities. So it doesn't come from us. We say this is the general framework, this is the Agenda 2030, but it has to come from mayors, elected people, to get the legitimacy. And so we only co-finance. So yeah, it's up to local authorities. We're doing some advocacy work, but so it's decentralized, but it's centralized in trying to get all the information and to orient it. It's a fine mix. Thank you so much.
I'm sure we are coming back on the question of the importance of coordination that the French government is doing here. Very important. Just before giving the mic to you, Gulnara, Alexi, the input of UNDP.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me the floor. So as Xavier mentioned, like the UNDP, United Nations Development Programme, is working to further strengthen the role of cities in the achievement of the SDG. I know I need to be brief, so I just highlight 3 points very quickly. So first, as part of the UN family, working with UNHabitat, working with UNECE, UNDP can serve as an entry point, to further support local authorities and cities willing to engage into decentralized cooperation. We're present globally in 170 countries and in Eastern Europe and Central Asia in 20 countries. And we have been for decades supporting territorial approach to development on planning and also like multi-stakeholder engagement, including with academia. So I'm pleased to be here also with the University of Geneva. Second, we believe strongly in the power of cities to cities exchange to tackle like the growing urban challenge, like for example the area of resilience, climate action, exclusion, or digital that are very much issues that has to be tackled at the local level. In the UNECE region, we notably have a close partnership with the EU through the Mayors for Economic Growth program that support equitable and green development and local innovation. We have also like a global program called City to City Network that brings cities and experts to design a solution for urban challenges related to circular economy or digital transformation, governance, also municipal financing. And we also help to contribute to run like the UN platform for localizing the SDG, the local 2030 platform. So just to conclude, in the spirit of SDG 17 partnership, we also, help to support the understanding and the implication of what it means, the 2030 agenda for local authorities, like in the external actions, not only working with France, but also Spain, Italy, and a number of partners. And we believe in this connection between bilateral local initiatives and existing multilateral frameworks. And we want to collaborate and expand our partnerships to bring impact at scale.
Thank you very much, Alexis. And your input through UNDP's with your UNDP hat is also very emblematic of what the French government is represented here and sharing with us in terms of the importance of coordination, multi-level coordination with international organizations, but also across the network of cities. This brings us to the end of this panel, a solid, a very complete and comprehensive mapping of some of the challenges and opportunities. And I'm sure we'll come back, if time permits, on some of the elements in the conclusion. The floor is yours, Spiro.
Thank you very much, Alexander. The question now becomes, how do we support the VLRs? And the key words are evidence-based approaches. And at the same time, I go back to the original comments and simply say that the cities, yes, they are the big consumers, but at the same time, they have the potential to be the big savers. So it's the right thing to start with the cities in the SDGs, no question about it. Now, what happens is that we have several efforts going on at the same time. And I have an excellent panel representing the UNHabitat, OECD, ITU, UNECE, and the University of Geneva. And as my dean told me a few days ago, you're using the alphabet soup, but this is how it is. Now, I asked all the speakers in this session to use only one slide. And now I'm afraid the situation is even worse. We have 3 minutes per person. So at 3 minutes, I'm going to ask you to stop. The objective here is very clear. The objective is for everybody to know the different efforts for 2 purposes. One is that we can collaborate among ourselves, so we don't have very many versions of evidence-based actually research. And the other one is for people to know what happens in these institutions and know whom to contact and for what. So these are teasers. It's not to explain, it's not to teach. You cannot teach in 3 minutes. So very simple. Let's start with Cristina Guedi. I don't follow the order. I just got a message that we have to start with Cristina. Also, let me say, we have strict orders that we cannot go after 3 o'clock with these kind of sessions.
2:55.
2:55. So, Cristina, please go ahead. Please, 3 minutes.
Thank you so much to the moderator, and thank you so much also to to UNECE and UNHabitat for actually organizing this side event. Maybe following the suggestion of the moderator, I'd like to use the second slide, if I may, and not this one. So I'll go really straightforward, responding on how ICU, being the United Nations Specialized Agency for RTPs, actually is supporting VLRs. A couple of years ago, ICU, together with UNECE, developed actually standards, a set of a methodology actually collecting a set of key performance indicators, which have been, standardized for becoming really an international standard in the ICU and UNECE. And then together we expanded actually this effort with other 15 UN bodies, including, UN Habitat, UNDP, and many other colleagues that listed actually in the cover of the methodology. These types of KPIs are actually a very good tool in terms of really helping, cities to, in a way, not only becoming smarter and more sustainable, but also achieve the SDGs. So that's the way how the voluntary local reviews are being considered as as an efficient tool, so including a set of indicators, including the participation of local actors, including really a key component as an analysis of policy coherence. So, for example, the voluntary local reviews that can foster horizontal and vertical alignment between existing development plans and strategies, and also support the strategic planning that was mentioned by Krista before. Indeed, actually, really helping cities to identify areas where action is needed, and thus establishing clear priorities that can orient strategic planning and budget choices towards the SDG localization. So as you can see on the screen, there is a wheel which, that's just an example of Valencia in Spain, but ICU has been implemented this set of KPIs in over 200 cities worldwide. And that's the idea on how we see that having a good solid set of KPIs can make a concrete difference in terms of providing really a solid base for cities on how to achieve the SDGs. In addition, we do work with cities actually in providing them also, with different formats that goes from the snapshot to the verification report. So, one of the questions that were asked in the briefing was how, this verification is carried out. And in the case of IT, it is carried out by a third-party auditor. So that's really a sort of a neutrality and transparency component that we ensure. And in saying that, of course, it goes without saying that when we work with cities, the objective is really to help them not only, achieve the sustainable development goals, but also help them into their daily challenges in using digital technologies and especially accelerating the digital transformation. And I think with that, I can conclude and say in the 3 minutes, I hope.
Terrific. Thank you, Christina, and thank you for presenting. I will try to point out the words united and smart cities that there appear for the first time in our discussion this afternoon. Thank you. We continue with Robert Dogua from Nairobi. We are going to hear from you, Robert, what you're doing at the UN Habitat. And again, please be brief, 3 minutes like Christina.
Thanks a lot, Spiro, and good afternoon, good evening to you all, wherever you might be connecting on from. Please just move on to the next slide, please. So briefly, I think listening from the many presenters who have spoken, I feel like I'm speaking very much to the converted, because I do feel that we all have some things we agree on. One is that we need to drive our urban development using evidence and data as the new normal. But at the same time, also, we need to be able to plan for the future urban development in a way that is very predictable. And what the Global Urban Monitoring Framework here tries to do is basically to address that specific component. But the uniqueness here is that for the first time, we've worked through a very multi-stakeholder approach and working with many partners, including what Santiago spoke about. The city of Madrid has worked with us on the development of urban monitoring framework. amongst many other partners. But virtually what we've done is to pull indicators and frameworks from many partners and ensuring that we harmonize it in a way that we can offer consistency, efficiency in monitoring, but also at the same time comparability when you want to compare amongst your cities or you want to compare your own city over time. And at the same time, of course, this is now very much connected as an anchor to supporting the voluntary local reviews, but at the same time also connecting with many other global programs like the UN Habitat flagship program on SDG cities, which basically connects you to the investment facilities. Next, please. So quickly, in terms of the structure, when we talk of the urban monitoring framework, we've harmonized not just what needs to be monitored at urban level for the SDGs, but also the new urban agenda, but also for many other subject matter specific frameworks. So here you're talking of what UNICEF might be doing with the Child Wellbeing Index in cities, and of course many other partners. So harmonization here brought us to this framework you see over there, where we have 4 city objectives focusing on safe and peaceful, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable cities, and then the 5 domains that focus on society, economy, environment, culture, governance, and implementation. So the matrix you see in the middle there, once you map out your indicators and map them through this framework, you're able to monitor seamlessly the performance of your cities, but in a way that connects to many other thematic issues. And this is what this sort of framework really offers to cities as well as mayors. Next, please. So in terms of our application, to be very practical, what you see here is basically the framework looked at in another way, where, for example, we've provided at the global level indicators that you can start to work with in a very consistent way, many of them drawn from the SDGs, but also the new urban agenda, as well as others, indicators that were contributed to directly by some cities and other partners that participated in the formulation of this framework. So the structure here and the cobweb you see there basically tells you that if you do your first baseline, you're able to understand where you stand today. And when you repeat this process, you're able to map out the gaps and opportunities, and particularly target and invest in improving those over the years. We have 72 indicators that are mapped initially, but this is always a plus or minus, so any city can always add on. And I think Santiago can speak very well because the city of Madrid is currently working with this mapping, where most of the indicators are being retrofitted into the context that the city is more comfortable. Next, please. So with those remarks, I do feel that for cities and mayors who are interested in participating in this, we have our colleagues currently in the forum and connecting in far away from Kenya, but obviously it will be very good to follow up with all those who are interested in testing and piloting this. We have a couple of cities globally that are already piloting this process. And obviously the strong message here, as you see there, that it's very key and supports very much the voluntary local review aspects, particularly in the client session. Thanks a lot. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Robert. And I hope soon we're going to have a workshop with Madrid and all this wonderful framework so we can see how you apply it. But let's proceed right now. Stefano from OECD. Stefano, please go ahead. And you said you're going to focus primarily on how the KPI system supports cities in measuring the progress in achieving the VLMs.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much, Steven. Thank you, Gunnar and the UNECE colleague for the invitation. We really like to convey two messages here. First, what the OECD is doing, as you said, so everybody can know which are our indicators that we are using for this work. And then very briefly, an example on how we use this framework in one of the UNECE cities, the city of Bonn in Germany. Maybe you can go to slide number 3. We can skip the first 2. Just to say that the OECD, the one before, please. Okay. Just to say that this is part of a broader OECD program on a territorial approach to the SDGs, where the indicator framework is one of the 3 components, and the other are policy and strategy and multi-level governance. So we'll only focus on this, given that I have 3 minutes. Together with our member country, we developed this OECD localized indicator framework that currently includes 135 indicators. And with this 135 indicator, we can measure 65 of the 105 targets that we identify as key for cities and regions out of the 169 target. As you can see in the graph on the left, the good news is that we have indicators for all the 17 goals. So we're not only focusing on SDG 11 here. Of course, we have a lower coverage compared to the UN Habitat Framework, but we are covering all the 17 goals because the message is that cities has a key role for all the 17 SDGs. At the same time, we have a higher coverage for region compared to cities. And in order to facilitate the use of this indicator to cities in particular, we produce this web tool that you can find on the right. It's an open web page where all cities can just add their name in the web tool, and they will see, for example, how they are comparing, how they are performing on the SDGs compared to the OECD average, compared to their national average, and compared to some peer city that the web tool is identifying. If we go to the next slide, this indicator framework was very useful for two things for us. First, to identify globally which are the gaps that cities and regions has in terms of the SDGs, and is the way also how we are representing it. We can see, for example, for cities that the main gaps are industry and innovation, climate, biodiversity, and energy in OECD countries, and also gender is a big gap both for regions and cities. Beyond that, we can see that cities and regions in OECD countries are lagging behind in all the SDGs and all the targets of the SDGs. So this is a big issue also in OECD countries. And if we go to the next slide, here is an example of how we have been using this indicator framework with the 10 cities and regions we have been working with in these 3 years, the city of Bonn in Germany. What we did is to use this indicator framework. It used the data that we have in our global indicator framework that comes from the National Statistical Institute of OECD member countries. So it's also a multi-level governance effort to coordinate the data system, plus the data that the city themselves provided to the OECD team, to the OECD statistical team. So we identify which are the main gaps compared to the OECD average, that is the black line, and compared to the national average and the other city in Germany, it is the orange dot. And this was useful to identify some strengths of the city of Bonn, for example, healthcare, innovation, accessibility to green spaces. Some of the main gaps, challenges that the city of Bonn still has in terms of SDG achievement, in particular transport, air pollution, and old age poverty. And also, what is also probably even more important, how the SDGs can be used, how this indicator framework can be used to promote synergies among some of these policy areas and to manage some of the trade-off. Just two quick examples. One is one of the gaps that is sustainable mobility in the city of Bonn. So the city, one of the recommendations of the city is to introduce some policy measure to promote sustainable mobility. But at the same time, being inequality also a very important area, the recommendation was to make sure that, for example, if you introduce some congestion charges to reduce the impact on climate, this will not have an impact on the poor share of the population of the city of Bonn. So the idea is to balance the economic with the environmental component of the policy that we are recommending. But another one is, one of the goals is to promote affordable housing, to provide more space for affordable housing in the city of Bonn. So the idea is to balance this with the need to maintain the green spaces of the area. That is another priority of the city. So the idea is also always to see how this integrated framework of the SDGs can help manage some of these sectoral trade-off that a city is facing. And I will stop here.
Thank you very much. Actually, a couple of things. First, thank you very much for bringing a solid example like Bonn. Second, what becomes apparent is that we need a critical mass of cities that they apply a particular elaborate model in order to start making comparisons. So I appreciate that you brought the comparisons up there. And we continue with Anthony Salazar from UNECE.
Yes, thank you, Spiro. So first, it's very humbling, of course, to see the collective experience here, vis-a-vis my own, which is rather limited. I've selected the instance of Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan, where UNECE is currently very active. Now, I will try to be extremely brief, and what I wanted to highlight here was 2 recent missions UNECE carried out to Bishkek, and these highlight not just the indicator systems we use there, but actually the outcomes. So there, our most recent mission to Bishkek took place in March with Golnar Role as regional advisor to UNECE. And there we presented 2 projects. The first is the Bishkek City Profile, which utilizes key performance indicators There are 107 in total, so we're not going to go into each of those, but we have actually analyzed each individual indicator in order to then create a more comprehensive list, which we hope to integrate later. And the second was a project built on assessing the vulnerability of the local economy and financial system in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. So ultimately, our findings there are that all monitoring in cities, it does not necessarily depend on the indicators themselves, but rather how those are how the assessment is carried out at the local level. So the outcomes of these missions were not just the presentation of the publications, but actually assisting the municipality in linking indicator systems to downstream financiers for projects that are intimately linked to sustainable development goals. So there we managed to link a downstream financier, the city's development initiative to Asia, to a project in Bishkek, which is aimed at upgrading informal settlements. With UNECE support, we managed to find a $500,000 grant, which is aimed at improving the settlements and improving jobs creation there. So in order to be brief, what I wanted to really highlight here is that UNECE finds that inclusive urban monitoring is the key message here. And what this ultimately means is not placing so much emphasis on indicators and systems themselves, but rather finding solutions on how indicators are implemented at the city level. Now, to that end, we aim to not be so rigid in our methodology. So as an alternative to key performance indicators and also to the global and urban monitoring framework, which will be used in the development of voluntary local reviews, UNECE has developed its own system of indicators, which is referred to as Kpis Plus. And similar to other projects which have been mentioned here, these aim to identify gaps in the current KPI structure, which we find are critical for cities to integrate in in the development of voluntary local reviews, or rather provide an alternative so that cities can create a tailored system of indicators where they can select the gaps which exist in their own sustainable development goals to then use indicators they find are most suitable. With that, I'll actually stop. Two other initiatives I want to mention is that UNECE is currently aggregating all of its data, so we utilize a number of indicator systems. But one goal we have is to take the data from each of those indicator systems and to put them into a single urban monitoring system. And here I think that Matteo will take over, and it will be actually quite a good transition because we have worked extensively with the University of Geneva to take these indicators and actually visualize them. So I can stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. And Matteo, as you continue, University of Geneva, University of Milan, please pay some attention about the quality of data, something we discuss often, especially since we saw two examples of the developed world, and then we saw Anthony's choice of a city. How are we sure that the quality of data from Kyrgyzstan is really what we need?
Thank you, Spiro. I'll try to make my point in 1 minute right now. So most of what we discussed today, I believe, hinges on the assumption that at the local level, we produce good quality data. And that is a big assumption to make. And however, most often we just, rubricate that under there is a human component in data at the local level, and just we are happy with that. And we say, okay, we cannot have perfect data. We cannot have always consistent high quality data because there is a human factor. So what I want to stress is that at University of Geneva, in collaboration with UNECE, we have been running for a couple of years a project trying to make that human component visible and measurable. What we call the data culture of each institution. And we work mostly on housing data for that. So after a couple of years, we managed to build a model of data cultures for institutions working on housing. So we try to make what lies underneath the data work visible, and we built a tool that can help institutions to understand better their data culture. So that tool now is in the testing phase. So mayors, please call us up, send us an email, local governments, regional governments, and central governments, so that we can test it as extensively as possible and stress test it. And the second point I want to raise is that whatever intervention we want to make on an institution data culture cannot be top down, because if you ever try to change anyone's culture, you see what happens. You get only resistance, right? So the only thing we can do is to help them understand where they stand in terms of alignment of their data culture with the global objectives, and then try to work out with them interventions that respect and the institution and help the institution align its data culture with the objectives. So for that, and I will close here, we believe it's extremely important to provide online open access e-learning platforms that local governments can access to increase, local institutions can access to increase their knowledge base, but then interventions must be acts of co-creations and cannot be in any way imposed from above. And I will stop here.
Thank you, Matteo. It was 3 minutes. Anyway, thank you very much. Actually, we don't have time. So let me put a theoretical question here. If I were a mayor and I would like to choose any one of these systems, what applies to my city? Which means, are there particularities in your systems that they make it appropriate for a particular city, number one? Number two, is there any way to have a unified system that we can use for all the cities? But let's keep that question as a rhetorical question. We put on the side, and we continue to our next speaker online, Alexei Borisov, who comes from the UN Association Russia. So, Alexei, you have only 3 minutes.
Thank you a lot. Thank you, Peter. My pleasure to join now today's fruitful discussion and exchange of practices. Our core project in this direction is Russian regions and the UN Sustainable Development Goals program, which has been underway since 2009 with the support from UN Information Center in Moscow and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russian Federation. Within the program implementation, we consult the regions and its cities on the development of the voluntary local reviews. Together with official regional representatives, we form the description of the economical, social, and environmental situation in the region, its strategies, and the place of SDGs in them. Set the KPIs for assessments based on the voluntary national reviews, local strategies, UNECE KPIs for smart sustainable cities, collect the data by related local authorities, assesses and issue the recommendations for achieving SDGs on the process of future assessment. Periodically, the UN Russia issues reports in which from 1 to 3 regions present their voluntary local reviews. The report is available at our website, www.un.eu, in English and Russian. The regions are Moscow, Republic of Tatarstan, the Sverdlovsk, and the Samara regions. Within our consultation for the regions, we devote particular attention to the coherence between voluntary local reviews and voluntary national review, and focus on evidence-based approaches, including the creation and the adaptation of exact quantifiable indicators relevant to a region or a city. The latest edition of the report, which was presented at the Palais des Nations in Geneva last December, last year, I included a voluntary review of the Samara region. The form of the description of its advancing toward each SDG will address the relevant local ministries requesting the information, considering the existing national KPIs and data on local KPIs. Thus, for Samara region, special attention was devoted for the green energy, investment policy, science and education, reducing inequality and measures to combating the pandemic of COVID. In the voluntary local review, we usually also mark the regional project which received high international evaluation. Thus, 2 projects of Samara region received the UNECE Building Back Better Award 2021. Currently, in the UN Association Russia, we have been actively working on the project development, including the SDG laboratories. Additionally, I would like to highlight the project which UNA Russia has been implementing with the Center for Sustainable Development and ESG Transformation of University. We worked on the Russians. Within our work, we refer to the guidelines for the development of voluntary local reviews in the UNECE region and the collection methodology, the key performance indicator for smart sustainable cities. Once the project is released, the information will also appear at our website. Finalizing, I'd like to know that in our time, we in the United Nations in Russia see the importance of our continued work in sustainable development and will proceed the related activities building on existing and searching for new ways and approaches. Thank you a lot.
Thank you very much, Alexei, and back to you, Gulnara and Shipra.
Thank you so much. I guess the next steps that now we expect Madrid organizing a meeting on global monetary framework, and Stefano will do for us a meeting on OECD framework. So we definitely have planning. We have a plan for the future. And many thanks to all the speakers and to the moderators. Again, to say that indeed online modules like we developed with University of Geneva, Trondheim, are very important, and so we continue working. Thank you so much. And I would like to remind that in the room 17, we have concluding session for the Forum of Mayors. So invite you to join us in the plenary of the Forum of Mayors. Thank you.